Something really terrifying happened when I went on a date with a cool girl from my high school class. In 2018, she loved horror movies just like me. So we went to a mall that was not that big or crowded to watch Halloween, that 2018 version, and the movie was at 6:30 p.m. I got us some popcorn and Skittles. I really wanted to give her a good first impression. I haven't had many dates at that time. We sat in the middle seats, and there were just us and another couple in there. As the movie started, I could feel the excitement build between us. The theater was almost empty, which made the atmosphere feel even more intense, and I noticed her glance at me a few times, probably to gauge my reaction. About halfway through the movie, I realized that the other couple had left. Actually, it was like they just disappeared. I didn't even hear them get up, which was weird because the theater doors are always loud. When I looked around, there was no one. It was just the two of us now, sitting in the middle of a silent, nearly empty theater. The tension on screen was building, and I could feel her getting closer to me, probably from the scares. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. At first, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me. It was a movie theater. There were no lights, or I thought maybe the lighting from the screen reflecting in a weird way, but it was then that I saw a figure moving really quickly in the very back row, in the shadows, and I got creeped out. The figure in the back row wasn't there when the movie started. It had appeared without a sound, like it was waiting for the movie to begin. Trying to ignore it, I focused back on the movie, but every few minutes, my eyes would dart to the back seats, and there that thing was. It wasn't moving anymore, it was just sitting there. I couldn't see any details, just a dark shape slouched in the seat, completely still. I tried to rationalize it, maybe a latecomer who didn't want to disturb anyone, but it still felt wrong. Then, about 10 minutes before the movie ended, the screen literally flickered for a second, like a glitch. The lights from the screen went out completely, leaving the theater in pitch black. The emergency lights didn't even come on. "Oh yeah, cool," she said. But before I could say anything back, the screen turned back on, only for a moment. In that brief moment, I turned my head back a little, and I saw the shadow in the back standing up, facing us. I grabbed her hand, and we both stood up quickly. I didn't want to cause a scene, but my heart was racing at this point. I whispered, "Hey, we should get out of here. I think I saw something in the back seats." She didn't argue. The movie was almost over anyway. And come on, it wasn't the best Halloween version too. We started walking down the aisle as quickly as we could, and the figure was still standing in the back row, not moving, but it was like I could feel it watching us. We made it to the exit doors, but when I pushed them, they wouldn't open. It was like they were stuck. "Are you kidding me?" I muttered, trying not to panic. She pulled out her phone to use the flashlight. The room was dark with the movie still playing, and we thought we were trapped for a moment. And then the door opened. I think it was indeed stuck. But then we heard very slow footsteps coming from our backs. We turned around, and that was when she also saw that dark shadow, but it wasn't facing us. It was walking to the right side, but something about the way it moved wasn't right, almost exactly like you see in those ghost caught on camera videos on YouTube. It was too slow, and it didn't look human at all. Man, my stomach fucking dropped. We instantly bolted out into the hallway without looking back. We didn't stop until we were in the main entry of the mall, gasping for air. When I looked at her, she was pale and shaking. "Oh my fucking God. What the hell was that?" she said. But that's exactly what I wanted to know. After that, we actually heard that a few weeks later, the theater had been shut down for renovations, but we always wondered if there was something more to it. Because how did that couple disappear without making any noise too? I don't know if we saw something we weren't supposed to see that night. At least we married, and we're still together today. Crazy experience. This happened when me and my cousin went to watch a movie called Ponyo with my grandma when we were just kids. Our session was at 12 p.m., and there weren't any people there except us. When we were maybe 30 minutes in the movie, my grandma went to the bathroom, and a few minutes later, I saw this weird old man going upstairs approaching us. I tried to ignore it at first, but then the guy literally sat down in the seat in my right. "Hey, you want to see something really fun?" the dude said to me. I froze. My cousin didn't seem to notice at first, too engrossed trying to understand the movie. But I couldn't focus. The man's voice was low and whispery, and there was something really off about him. His clothes looked old and worn, like he'd been wandering around for years. His face was pale and slightly sweaty, with deep-set eyes that seemed too intense for the situation. "No, I'm good," I muttered, trying to shift my attention back to the screen, but my hands were trembling slightly, and I could feel my pulse quicken. I glanced over at my cousin, who was still somehow oblivious, chuckling at the animation. The man leaned in closer, his breath warm and heavy, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. "Come on, kid, don't be scared. It's something really special," he said with a crooked grin spreading across his face. His hand started to move toward the bag at his side. Panic surged through me. I glanced around the theater, but the place was dead quiet except for the movie's soft sounds. There was no one. No one to help, no staff, no other people. My grandma was still in the bathroom. It felt like time had slowed down, and I was suddenly very aware of how alone we were. "I'm watching the movie," I stammered with my voice cracking slightly as I shifted uncomfortably in my seat. I thought about getting up and running out, but I wasn't going to leave my cousin alone. I kept hoping my grandma would walk back in any second, but she was taking way too long. The man didn't seem to care. He was fiddling with something in his bag now, with his eyes darting between me and whatever he was pulling out. I couldn't see it clearly, but they looked like wires. My stomach churned as my imagination ran wild. Was it a weapon? Something worse? Just then, the man started humming, some low off-key melody that didn't match the light-hearted music from the movie. It was like he was in his own world, oblivious to how uncomfortable he was making me. My cousin finally turned to look, and I saw the confusion crossing his face as he noticed the stranger beside me. "Who's that?" he asked. His voice was innocent but laced with unease. Before I could answer, the man jerked his head toward him. "You'll see it too, kid. Just wait. You'll love it," he said, his grin widening. I stood up abruptly with my heart racing. "We need to go," I whispered urgently to my cousin while grabbing his arm. But before I could lead his away, the man reached out, with his bony fingers wrapping around my wrist. "You don't want to miss this," he said, his voice suddenly more serious, almost threatening. I yanked my arm free, panic bubbling up in my chest. "Let go," I snapped with my voice louder than I intended. The man's smile faded, replaced by a cold, hard stare that chilled me to the core. Just then, the theater doors creaked open, and I saw my grandma walking in. Relief flooded over me. "Grandma!" I shouted while waving frantically. She stopped in the aisle, looking confused at first, but then she noticed the man. Her face changed. She marched up to us, with her usual gentle demeanor replaced with something I've never seen before. Anger. "What's going on here?" she demanded. She stepped between us and the man with her posture surprisingly strong for her age. The man stood up slowly with his grin returning. "Just showing the kid something fun," he said with a casual tone, but the way he looked at my grandma, like he was sizing her up, made my skin crawl. "Well, we don't need your fun. Get lost," she said. For a moment, I thought he was going to argue, or maybe do something worse. But then, without another word, he turned and walked down the stairs, disappearing into the darkness of the theater. My grandma stood there for a few seconds, watching him leave, before turning back to us. "Let's go," she said with her voice softer now, but still tense. We grabbed our things and followed her out of the theater. As we stepped into the bright lobby, I felt like I could breathe again. My cousin was quiet and shaken, and I could still feel the man's grip on my wrist, like a ghostly imprint. But that's when I thought we were really gonna get screwed, because I turned my head back when we were near the lobby, and I saw the same old man, but he was with another guy. The other guy was wearing a hoodie, and I couldn't see his face from the distance. But there was something else. When the dude with the hoodie saw that I was looking at them, he quickly hid an object behind his back, and I think it was some kind of metal bar. I turned to my grandma, whispering, "Look, it's him. He's not alone. Look," I pointed out. My cousin followed my gaze, and his face paled when he saw them too. The dude was still hiding the object behind his back, and the old man was standing still watching us too. They weren't making any move to follow us, but I saw that the old man smiled that same eerie grin, like he knew something we didn't. My grandma saw them now too, and she took both of our hands firmly and said, "We're leaving now," leading us to the exit. After that day, we stayed away from any movie theater on Earth for a while, maybe 2 years, but fortunately we escaped the situation. My first job ever was in a movie theater in LA, but something horrible made me quit the job after just 4 months. This story is really crazy. It was a Saturday at 11 p.m. I was alone and almost closing. My coworker Jeff had already left. I was used to it, so I didn't care about it. I was scrolling through my phone when suddenly I heard one of the theater doors opening. Keep in mind that we had locked all the doors, so I got really confused. And indeed, one of them was opened. I froze for a second, staring at the open door across the lobby. My mind raced as I tried to rationalize it. Maybe Jeff had forgotten to lock it on his way out. But no, man. I was sure we double-checked everything together before he left. Slowly, I put my phone down and stood up. I called out, "Hello? We're closed." My voice echoed in the empty theater, but there was no response. I approached the door cautiously, expecting some last-minute customer to have snuck in. But when I peered into the dimly lit hallway that led to the screening rooms, it was completely empty. Just as I was about to shut the door, I heard it, a soft, almost inaudible sound. It was like a faint whisper, coming from further down the hallway. My heart thudded in my chest as I strained to listen, but the sound had already faded. I shook my head, thinking maybe it was just my mind. I reached for the door to close it, and then, from the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow standing inside of there. It was the silhouette of a man. As this wasn't bad enough, I heard somebody screaming down the hallway. I turned my head, and when I turned back to the shadow silhouette, it was gone. "All right, that's enough," I muttered to myself, trying to shake off the rising terror. I locked the door anyway and headed back to the counter, determined to finish up and leave. As I resumed scrolling through my phone, something caught my attention again. This time, it wasn't a sound, but the unmistakable flicker of a light. One of the theater rooms. Room 3. The projector was on, casting a faint glow through the small window. I was completely sure I hadn't started any screenings, and the last movie ended hours ago. Actually, now I was more annoyed than scared. I grabbed my flashlight and walked toward room 3, convincing myself that the projector was malfunctioning, that it was all just technical problems. But when I opened the door to the theater, the projector shut off instantly, plunging the room into complete darkness. I stood at the entrance, gripping the flashlight tightly, as the silence swallowed me. I scanned the room with the beam of light, row by row, seat by seat. Empty. I turned to leave, but just before I stepped out, I heard it again. That same faint whisper. This time it was like someone was standing right behind me. I spun around, shining the flashlight across the seats again. "Who's there?" I said, but no answer. My skin prickled, and I felt an overwhelming urge to get out of there. I quickly shut the door and made my way back to the lobby. As I approached the counter, something stopped me dead in my tracks. The front door, the one I had locked just minutes ago, was wide open again. My stomach dropped. How in the fuck, man? There was no way someone could have opened it without me hearing, let alone without a key. I walked over to the door with every step slower than the last, and I hesitated before looking out. The parking lot was empty, just as it had been all night. There was no one there. I closed the door again, locked it, and backed away with my eyes fixed on the handle. Then the lights in the lobby flickered. My heart raced as the lights came back on, and I heard footsteps. Not just faint whispers this time, but solid, heavy footsteps. They were coming from behind me down the hallway. I backed up toward the counter, trying to keep calm and to think rationally. I stood there, paralyzed with fear, staring at the empty space where the sound had been, waiting for something, anything, to happen. But nothing did. The silence stretched on, suffocating, until finally, I saw the same shadow silhouette at the end of the hallway, standing still and looking at my direction. That was a big nope for me. I grabbed my things and bolted for the back exit, slamming the door behind me as I raced out to my car. I never worked another night shift there again, and after a few days I quit my job there. I told everything to my coworker Jeff, and then he said something I was definitely not expecting. He said that one night, he thought he saw the shadow of a man down the hall too, but that was it. Nothing else happened to him. I don't know what was happening that night, and I don't care to find out. All I know is something was there with me, something I couldn't see but could definitely feel. It's been years, and I still get chills thinking about it.